Hello and welcome to this webinar on Baillie Gifford's US Growth Trust. The session today is titled 2024, a year of unprecedented opportunity. My name is Amy Maxwell and I'm from Citywire. Here to talk us through that opportunity set is Kirsty Gibson, co-manager of the Trust. Over the next 25 minutes, Kirsty is going to be giving us an insight into the innovations that are transforming our world. We'll be covering exciting sectors such as space travel, synthetic biology, healthcare and online gaming. Welcome, Kirsty. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So we've got a lot to delve into in this session. Let's start with the Trust's collection of exceptional public and private sector growth companies. That's a really important tenet. It's that combination of public and private growth companies. And home to many of these is the US. So what is it about the US that keeps it consistently among the best places to find and invest in exceptional growth companies?
I think the answer to that question comes back to the fact that the United States has all the ingredients necessary for a really healthy innovation ecosystem. So it has, the best academic research institutions in the world. It has a strong talent pool, which is supplemented by immigration, and it is still the country for talented individuals who want to start a business. Looking through the Trust holdings, I can name many that are founded by individuals born outside of the US. The idea of the American dream is very much alive and well. It has a very well-developed venture capital system in the US. It provides strong intellectual property protection and a very business-friendly environment. And finally, there's just this culture of optimism and ambition alongside a real willingness to accept failure. And it's the combination of all of those things that I think really helps the US to be, one of the most innovative places on the planet. At the end of 2023, 62 of the world's most valuable companies that were listed were based in the US. If you add in Shopify, which is a Canadian business, that takes North America's tally to 63. So 63 of the top 100 companies in the world are based in North America.
And genuinely, there's a high level of expectation that if you discover something, you will make it into a business, which is somewhat unlike the culture here in the UK or across Europe.
Yeah, it's the fact that you've got this system in place where if you're at a university, for example, and maybe you're a scientist and you discover something breakthrough with biotechnology, the ease at which you can convert that and the way that the system is set up for the universities to support you, for the venture capitals to be able to provide that support in terms of capital, means that it's a lot easier for universities to spin out new companies, new up-and-coming businesses, which over time can grow into much larger businesses. That's a lot more challenging in somewhere like the UK, where the university will own, a huge percentage of that company, and yet nearly all of the work is done by the entrepreneur themselves.
And I mean, the elephant in the room, of course, is 2024 is an election year. We have a potential of a Trump rerun. So how does that look in terms of the favorability of these companies going forward and the economic climate for future prospects?
I mean, given our sort of 5 to 10 year investment horizon, we're looking to invest for a length of time, even beyond the, a 2-term president. Consequently, we do not look to dramatically alter our positioning based on upon a hypothesis around who will be elected. That's not to say we don't discuss the topic, but a character like Donald Trump, for example, is just very difficult to predict. Let's take the example of electric vehicles. The topic of climate change is clearly very contentious. And so rallying against electric vehicles might be a logical decision for him to make. However, these cars are also being manufactured in the US by a US company. Consequently, it's just difficult to know exactly how that's going to land. So our focus is therefore on what we believe to be the largest structural changes for the next decade. And we look to invest in those, understanding that those sort of macro or political environments will probably come out in the wash in the long run.
So the investment horizon spans longer than the election cycle.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you got our investment horizon to align up perfectly with an election cycle, which obviously it doesn't, we're still looking to invest over 5 to 10 years, which is beyond, we know that the next president will be a single term president. So, that's well beyond the 4-year term that they will serve.
Okay, and can we delve a little bit deeper into the idea that the trust is made up of, as I said at the beginning, the public and private companies. So how do you, what's the philosophy for treating these companies? Is there a difference in the way in which you research them, manage them, engage with them?
Yeah, so there are 3 core tenets to our investment philosophy. We believe these apply across both public and private companies. Now, there are some differences between both, and we can dive into those in a minute. But those 3 core tenets are: we're active, we're long term, and we're growth. And great businesses are not made overnight. Thus, we try to own these businesses in a long term manner. Buying great companies and having the patience to wait for the exceptional characteristics of those companies to be reflected in their share prices. We're growth because we believe that superior profit growth leads to outperformance in the long run, and we're active because bottom-up stock picking allows us to exploit inefficiencies. Now, one such inefficiency is the US stock market. Academic papers and our internal work illustrate that it is a small number of stocks that drive all the return in the market. The further you extend out the time horizon, the more profound that effect becomes. And we look to exploit this inefficiency. It's not about how often you're right, it's about how much you can make for clients when you are. And we believe that exceptional growth businesses, whether they're public or they're private, share some common characteristics. They're addressing large and expanding opportunities. They have or they are building strong competitive positions, and they have distinctive cultures. These are companies who are often run by individuals who care about the vision, not the short-term share price. The main difference I would highlight between the two is that, private companies can choose who their investors are. That's not the case with publicly listed businesses, and consequently, the relationship building, the reputation that you can bring to a company, being a long-term shareholder, not being in there for the short term, not being the companies that have to sell out as soon as a company IPOs, allows us, a foot in the door to build these relationships with these exceptional businesses.
And do you think there's been a cultural shift where we've seen companies staying private for longer? And if so, what do you think has been driving that?
I think there's an element of that. I mean, the evidence suggests that is true, that there are many more companies staying private for longer than they would have. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Partly, as I mentioned earlier, the venture capital system has now, and the role of private equity has developed in a way that allows these companies to stay private for longer because people are willing to fund them. I think it's also partly a reflection of, public markets. The time horizon of public markets has shortened quite dramatically over the past couple of decades. And the reality is, if you're running a company where you're trying to change the world, or you're trying to invest in a technology that's going to take the next decade plus to bring to the forefront, if you have to sit and report to investors on a quarterly basis, and your share price is going to be going up and down all over the place, that's going to cause quite a lot of distraction for management teams. Even the best of us, even with the best intentions of saying I'm not going to be distracted, your employees are going to be distracted by those share price changes as well. So I think that the public markets, the fact that the time horizon of the public markets has come in a long way, has potentially driven private companies to stay out of that market for as long as possible.
So it could be potentially detrimental to the long-term sort of vision of the company by going public.
Yeah, it potentially can. Now, for some, it's a great opportunity to place, bring new investors in, legitimize the business to some extent. Companies want to ensure that they're working with companies that are not just suddenly going to disappear. And so being listed as a company provides some degree of credibility there. But I think there is an element of the fact that the time horizon of your average private investor and your average public market investor are probably quite different. And the more, public market, the more scrutiny there is towards the sort of short-term earnings that you produce, etc. It is more of a fight. And many companies are taking on that fight, but it can be more of a fight to be able to keep that long-term vision at the center of what you're trying to achieve, rather than being distracted by the sort of cacophony of noise and newspaper articles that are going on around you.
So within the trust, that exposure to both public and private provides a nice level of diversification, I imagine.
Yeah, it allows us from our perspective, it allows us to ensure that we are providing our clients with access to the most exceptional growth businesses in America, whether they be public or whether they be private. And some of those companies will stay private for longer than others. Some of them are on the clear path towards looking towards IPOing, and some of them are already public. But there, like I said, there are some differences in some of the elements of public versus private investing, but fundamentally the characteristics that we're looking for in these businesses are very, very, very similar.
And another elephant in the room, I suppose, is that there's been a lot of discussion in the past year about the concentration at the top of the S&P. How are you thinking about the market?
Yes, I mean, there has been a lot of coverage over the past year about the dominance of 7 companies in particular. And we own 4 of those within the trust. So we own Amazon, we own Tesla, we own Nvidia, and we own Meta.
And of course, we're talking that 7 of the Magnificent 7, as it's
the Magnificent 7. Yeah,
reported so
heavily. We're not holders of Apple or Microsoft or Alphabet. And I think, but what we're really excited about, I guess, is trying to think about who the big winners of the future might be. Could that be something like a Shopify, for example, the commerce platform that offers online and offline tools that span payments and website development and logistics? Or could it be something like the Trade Desk, which allows more effective advertising purchasing? It harnesses the power of something called programmatic advertising, which is basically using data to buy adverts. So the Trade Desk sorts through 15 million ads per second.
Wow.
To decide where to place the right inventory. And this enables advertisers, because you're using data to buy these ads, it means that advertisers can serve adverts based on who is watching. So if we were both watching using something like a connected TV, so we were signed into kind of More 4 or the Channel 4 offering, we sign in with our email address, there's some understanding to the demographic that we represent. If we were watching the same TV program at that point through that connected TV, we would be served different adverts depending on who we are. And then finally, someone like a DoorDash. So DoorDash is a food delivery company in the US. It operates in a highly complex industry where margins are very slim and inefficiencies highly costly. The company is a dominant player in the food service delivery market. It has about 2/3 market share. And Uber Eats has around about 25%. And it's commonly believed that this is just a terrible industry and that no one will ever make money. But the fact that DoorDash made $1.3 billion of free cash flow last year would suggest otherwise.
So I suppose it pays then to look beyond these dominant 7, of course, and really look at the underlying dynamics. So it's a stock picker's market really out there beyond the headlines.
Yeah, exactly. I think more broadly, we just think about the market in a fundamentally different way, which is, as I mentioned earlier, what are the structural trends that are driving that future progress? The future of commerce is what we would describe as kind of our largest exposure. This sort of trend stretches players like Amazon, that we all know relatively well, to specialty players like Chewy in pets or Wayfair in home, Oddity in beauty, and then even things like a commercial or a residential property player like CoStar. We also have, we're really quite excited about the new enterprise, as we shift from a world of being many things done on premise into the cloud, but also as we embrace the opportunities provided by artificial intelligence. There's things like the digitization of entertainment. We've moved towards a world of consuming so much more content in a digitized way, whether that be your gaming or streaming, all the business to business tools that enable that to happen. The future of transportation, as we move towards an electric vehicle world, or even something like in the healthcare sector, we're seeing a big evolution with the emergence of platform businesses in healthcare. So these are businesses where they have a sort of core technology and they're using that technology to address numerous different diseases, and also just the greater personalization of medicine more generally as well.
So these are all kind of the next generation then. So you look at the 7, the Magnificent 7, they've proved their worth. But this next generation coming through are emerging and in key areas where, commerce, the cloud, AI, digitization of entertainment, healthcare, So everything is much more about using, much more about personalization. Is that a common thread across all of these?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the reality is that you've reached a point where you can just make more things. You just have a lot more choices to make things exactly how you want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
You can choose from, an unbelievable list of content on Netflix. You can watch, anything from very niche to much more mainstream. You can, like you say, you can choose when you game, whether you game on your mobile or whether you're playing games on your PC or on a console, and potentially in augmented reality or virtual reality going forward. I think there's just so many more ways that each of us can find that kind of niche that we're most interested in, and companies are looking to provide that for us as individuals.
Okay, let's get a bit deeper into some of the opportunity sets. So then what gets you really excited when you're looking at the portfolio right now? Is there some data that you can provide us with?
Yeah, sure. So I think that if we focus on the public part of the portfolio at the moment, which is around 70% of the fund or the trust, what gets me really excited is just the fundamental progress that we're seeing in these companies. The median revenue growth rate for the public part of the portfolio is 23%. The market is 4%.
Wow.
So our listed businesses are showing growth and resilience even in a much more difficult macro environment. They're also adapting really well to an environment where self-sufficiency is essential. So 84% of the listed holdings by weight are at least positive free cash flow. So they have that sovereignty. They're in charge of their own destiny. And finally, our public businesses are investing.
Is that what you would normally define as having a moat? What would have had it?
No, a moat would be much more to do with the sort of competitive positioning. This is much more to do with the capital environment is just much more constrained at the moment than it has been historically. It's harder for companies to raise money. So if they have the ability to generate their own free cash, or they're able to have a large enough cash pile, they're less reliant or less dependent on external factors in order to fulfill their long run opportunity. They sort of have that sovereignty themselves to be able to achieve that.
So that's the end of the easy money era. So those companies that can stand on their own 2 feet without the gift of central bank capital.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what, the past few years, a lot of companies have been navigating, is that they've been saying, oh, okay, we need to get to a point where we have that sovereignty. We are able to control our own destiny. And there will, of course, be companies, whether that be in early stage biotech or something like that, where they are going to need, they are dependent on capital raises. But I guess that there will be potentially fewer of those going forward, or the expectation of what they deliver in order to be able to raise money is potentially higher.
And that goes back down to the fundamentals again, and the stock picking, and all of that close, detailed work that you're doing.
Exactly. And I think the other thing I'd want to highlight is just that our public businesses are investing at 3.6 times the rate of the S&P.
Wow.
So it's not just that these businesses are saying, oh, it's a different environment, we'll just stop growing. These businesses are still investing in their long run opportunities as well. So that that's really exciting.
And I wanted to touch a little bit about AI, because we hear a lot about NVIDIA, and AI is headline grabbing stuff. How does the trust look at it? I mean, from what I understand, most investments within the trust are in the kind of infrastructure space of AI. Could you explain the differences between the layers of where we're at with AI, and what is investable and what is not right now?
Yeah. So I think upfront is worth saying that I think AI presents a colossal opportunity, and I'm comfortable saying that I think this platform shift will be bigger than mobile.
Wow.
But we are very early in the change. And I think, so one of the models that we use internally is like you say, is thinking about the different layers. So most of our investments have been, or are, in this kind of infrastructure layer, or in the kind of cloud compute data center layer, so the sort of layer above that. Think about, we have stakes in NVIDIA and Amazon through, AWS being in cloud computing. What happens in that middleware layer? So this would be the AI model layer. So the ChatGPTs, the Llama 2s, all the kind of models. And then the app layer on top. So the people who build on top of those models. is just much more difficult to predict right now, given how early we are. Now, I'm sure that businesses will emerge that build apps on top of that AI layer and that go on to be very, very successful. Right now, what we're seeing is companies in our portfolio who are saying, hey, this represents a really significant opportunity for us. So one such company would be Duolingo. Duolingo is the language learning app. Lots of people using it to learn a language. And they've suggested that the emergence of generative AI has reduced the time that for them to reach parity with a human tutor from 15 years to 5 years.
Wow.
So this is what we're beginning to see, but like I say, we're just really early in the kind of what potentially we can do with these tools.
Okay. Now we've got a few minutes left of our before we move on to the Q&A. So I just wanted to get a flavour of some of the things in the private companies that you're excited about as well. Could you tell us some more about some of those in the trust?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like I said, 30% of the portfolio is in private companies. We can go up to 50, but we're around about 30 right now. And we ultimately believe this is something to be celebrated. This is why we launched the trust in the first place, to be able to have both public and private companies. Now, our top 10 private companies are 81% of the private weight right now. And actually 7 out of the top 10 private companies are large enough to be in the FTSE 100 if they were public. So these are not small companies.
Yeah, do you think there's some misconception then about the size of the private companies and
I think there's a sense that people sort of think it's like 2 guys in a garage in Palo Alto, and the reality is that that's just not true. These are companies that historically, like we said, would have been listed, but they're choosing to stay private for longer. So they're growing very well. Those top 10 that I mentioned, they have a 3-year average growth rate of 90% per annum. Like I said, that's versus a market of 4. The R&D spend is even higher than what we see with our public companies. So it's 6.3 times the rate of the market. So these companies they're growing, they're investing, and they're demonstrating, strong financial health as well. 40% of them have a cash runway of 1 to 3 years, 30% 3 to 5 years, and 30% have 5+ years of cash runway as well. So again, they're in a good. Many of them are in the top 10. They're in a very good financial position.
Okay, and SpaceX is your number 1 holding in the private top 10 as well as number 1 holding overall. Yeah. So a high conviction there. Anything to add on the investment case and how you see its trajectory going forwards?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, although it's been in the news relatively recently, but SpaceX makes rockets and satellites. So I think it was in 2018, they made 21 launches of their rockets, about half of which made successful ground landings, because what makes SpaceX different is it re-lands its rockets afterwards. In 2023, the company launched 97 orbital missions. It's more than tripled the number of launches since 2021, and they're all coming back to be usable again. It's driving the launch market. It has more than 2/3 market share, and it's achieved this while making its service much cheaper, which has been driven by the reusability of its rockets. And I think nothing illustrates this better than the fact that the company has recently relaunched one of its Falcon rockets for the 15th time. And SpaceX is also leveraging this cost advantage to move into the communications sector via something called Starlink. So it's a low Earth orbital satellite constellation which delivers fast broadband to rural areas. It already has over 2 million paying customers, and they pay $100 a month. And Elon Musk has publicly stated that Starlink has achieved cash flow break even, and that it's joining the core launch business, which already makes money. So he's publicly disclosed these pieces of information.
So these businesses these growth businesses that you're investing in, they are pioneering. They are creating whole new infrastructures and networks in a way in which I think you've talked about it before. You've got the explorers versus the stewards. So the exciting thing about this trust is that it's full of explorers.
Yeah, it's full of explorers. So we own, in the private space, we own Zipline, which is a drone delivery company. It was our first private investment. their new delivery system, which involves a drone that basically hovers and lowers its payload, that launched in the US early last year. We own Stripe, the payment provider that lets merchants accept credit and debit cards, which actually disclosed a couple of weeks ago that in its annual shareholder letter that last year it processed over $1 trillion in global payment volume. And given that most of Stripe users sell what would be called final goods, so the finished good, the output of businesses on Stripe roughly equates to 1% of global GDP now.
Wow.
And we own companies that are probably less well known, like something like a Solugen, which is combining the best of chemistry with the tools of synthetic biology to make chemicals at higher yields and without the need for petrochemical processes.
Okay. Well, we're going to stop there for the interview part of this. Now we've got 20 minutes for Q&A, and I'm looking at this box, and it's absolutely rammed with questions. So let's try and race our way through this. The first one I'm going to pick up is, can you talk about the Stripe valuation? So we've just mentioned Stripe, and there's some new. You mentioned there's a shareholder letter that it's annual letter that came out recently. So do you want to talk us through what you think about its valuation?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the valuation is obviously set by the most recent round. Is the sort of starting point for any valuation that we do for the company. And I think that when you're talking about a business that's already processing over $1 trillion in total payment volume, the valuation that the recent round was made at doesn't feel overly stretching for the opportunity that's in front of the company. They also recently publicly disclosed as well that the company was cash flow positive in 2023 and expects to be again in 2024. So that this is a company with a sort of a significant growth opportunity to deliver on its mission of growing the GDP of the internet, but it's also doing that now at a point where it's reaching the point where it's in that kind of self-sustaining category of being able to do that from its own the cash flows that it's generating itself.
Okay. So we've got, which one stock do you think has the biggest long-term upside potential?
Oh, that's like picking your favorite child. Yes. I think one that I'd mention. I think one that I would bring up, which I mentioned earlier, is Shopify.
Right. Okay.
So Shopify, like I said, is a large holding for the trust, which is why I'm also mentioning it. But it's like I said, it provides sort of tools for online and offline merchants to basically help them to do their job. If you want to start a business, you turn to Shopify. It's ultimately driving entrepreneurship. And I think why I've picked that name is the company made quite a significant transition last year to really invest in artificial intelligence. And what they've launched a product called Shopify Magic. And rather than having just sort of a few AI tools, Shopify's basically decided to integrate artificial intelligence throughout its entire platform. And one of the sort of offerings that they've developed is called Sidekick. And the Sidekick basically allows customers to make changes to their website or to their what payments they accept or where they deliver to or various other bits and pieces using natural language. Now, the reason this is really exciting is because it allows customers access to consultancy-like services potentially in the future that only customers of scale would ever have been able to achieve previously. You could ask it something like, if I was to run, and this is obviously in future, this is continuing to develop over time, but if I was to run a discount during this period of the year, on what day would it be best to launch it? And based on all of the data that Sidekick has knowledge of in the Shopify ecosystem, it could say, given the product that you have, this is the best time. Or it could be, I sell snowboards in wintertime and I sell skateboards in summertime. Could you please update my website and change it from snowboards to skateboards? And it would just do it for you. And I think what's powerful about that is it basically continues to lower the barriers to entrepreneurship. Yeah. And the way Shopify makes money is that they basically make a cut on the products that people are using on their platform. And so the more people use their platform and the more products that people are using, and the easier it is to use those products, the more products people are going to use, you get to a point where all roads lead to Shopify, and they're basically taking a percentage of entrepreneurship.
Wow. So it's almost like the AI is starting to do really that hard graft in the beginning, and it's taking that away, so you get the velocity, and you can get
exactly. It makes it easier to start a business, and it makes it easier to run a business, so that all that you as an entrepreneur have to focus on is the idea. Now, that it might be that the quality of the idea is absolutely amazing, or it might be that the quality of the idea is not very good. But your ability to use the tools is not an impediment to your success. The success is dependent upon whether your idea was of good quality or not.
Yeah, the fundamentals.
Exactly, the fundamentals.
Another question here: why will this year? So this reaches into our title. Why will this year, 2024, be a year of unprecedented opportunity in such uncertain geopolitical times?
I think it comes back to the fundamentals. I think it comes back to the fact that great businesses are often forged in difficult times, and that at this point in time, it's the opportunity for companies to really, really prove themselves. Now, does it mean that it's going to be totally smooth sailing for these businesses? Does it mean it's going to be smooth sailing from a share price perspective? No, not necessarily. But what we're looking for when it comes to structural growth drivers and companies driving structural change is, are they making progress towards their long run opportunity? Because if they can deliver on that long run opportunity, like I said earlier, we believe that the profit growth that you can deliver will be reflected in your share price in time. So share prices in the long run start to reflect fundamentals. What we're seeing at the moment is that there are opportunities because there's a dislocation between those, and that there are high quality businesses which are not considered to be of the quality that people would expect, and that's providing us with opportunities. So like you mentioned earlier, it's about this being a stock pickers market. It's about having the time and the opportunity to spend looking at businesses, opening your eyes up to the different range of businesses that might be available at the moment, and deciding whether or not they meet the sort of criteria for the kind of exceptional growth businesses that we are looking for in the portfolio.
So it's this you get tougher businesses really out of this tougher market environment. I
think so. I think you have to navigate in a different way. Like you can. I think when it's a low interest rate environment, you can have lots of good businesses and some great businesses. I think when it's a tougher economic environment, you can have some really great businesses and some not so good ones. It's harder to be just a good business. You either sort of have to be great or you don't make it.
Yeah. Okay. Now I've got somebody here interested in Brex and some of the recent negative news flow around it. Last time they checked, it was in the top 10 holdings, but it's no longer there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's much more a reflection of moves within the portfolio, as opposed to, it's not that we've been actively reducing that. It's the case that because we have a mix of public and private companies in the portfolio, if the public companies do well, it can rearrange the sort of top 10. So it's not an active decision to be reducing that.
Okay. And should we touch upon the investment case for Brex and a little bit more about it for anyone who's not sure?
Yeah, so Brex is providing, ultimately providing financial offerings to smaller businesses, and obviously it can be a harder environment right now for a company like that, with the fact that if the macro is much tougher, that smaller business and smaller business formation, it can be more challenging. These is mainly for startups as opposed to just small businesses full stop. It's much more for startups. And so in the longer run, the great opportunity here is that startups often find it difficult to gain access to things like credit cards, for the fact that they don't have the credit record to be able to get those credit cards, and yet often they have a very large pile of cash in their bank accounts that they've managed to raise through a variety of different means. And so what Brex is doing is it's using this as an opportunity to underwrite these startups' risk using a different using different metrics to the traditional things, so that you can provide these credit cards to startups, and then over time you can start to provide other things like expenses systems. If you're providing startups with credit cards, do you also provide them with the expense system to help manage if you're handing those out to employees, do you want to have spending limits on those cards, et cetera, et cetera?
So again, it's infrastructure to make entrepreneurship more viable.
Yes.
Yeah.
This one is as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We've got a bit more of a macro question here. So, America is overstretched militarily. Regardless of who is president next year, where is your portfolio positioned regarding rebuilding in the sector? Does that make sense?
Rebuilding in
So I suppose it's defense.
US?
Defense, I suppose.
Defense.
Yeah. So are there many growth players in the defense sector? I think this is where this question is going.
Ultimately, we don't rule out sectors, but it's a matter of where we think the sort of long run growth opportunities are. And I think that it's obviously something that we can consider and we can look into, but it's not like we're explicitly saying here's a sort of trend that we expect to happen over the next year or so. Shall we try and buy some of those holdings? There are quite a lot of companies doing bits and pieces in connection with defense. So someone like a Ginkgo Bioworks, for example, is doing a lot of they're a synthetic biology company. They sort of scaled up their testing business during COVID. They created a testing business for testing for COVID, and they've sort of pivoted that business into biosecurity more generally. So testing water on aeroplanes, etc., trying to understand more about biopathogens or pathogens that might be coming, whether that be from natural sources that could mutate at some point into viruses, or whether that be from countries trying to use bioweapons. So there are elements there, but I think that I'd be hard pushed to say that we don't own a Northrop Grumman or someone like that, a pure defense name.
Okay. You mentioned the pandemic. There is a question here about Moderna. Why have you reduced your holding in Moderna when other BG trusts still have much larger holdings? Is that...
So we haven't actively reduced our holding in Moderna, and that's partly a reflection of Moderna not, from a share price perspective, not performing as strongly as other things within the portfolio. I think the reality of Moderna is, we didn't invest in Moderna for COVID. We had invested a couple of years before that. We invested in Moderna on the back of the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, that we see healthcare, the emergence of these platforms within healthcare. And Moderna is one such potential platform. So mRNA is the platform. Can you use mRNA to treat a variety of different diseases? And I think what the benefit of the pandemic for Moderna was that it proved the speed at which they could develop a vaccine, the effectiveness of such vaccine, which ultimately de-risked the use of mRNA in vaccines for infectious diseases. But the reality is they have faced challenges in that movement from the pandemic to the kind of endemic phase. Mm-hmm. And it's been difficult to know precisely, how much demand there will be for their vaccines. Why we still remain excited about them is that they are very much focused on this broader platform, this broader portfolio of offerings. Now, they've got data coming out in the next year for their combination of flu and RSV together. Flu and COVID together, a double vaccination for that. They've got RSV data coming through. They've also got they're moving the cancer vaccine that they've had very positive data for. They're moving that cancer vaccine into a different types of cancer. So they started in melanoma and they're now moving into testing that in other cancers as well. So it's much broader than a sort of COVID vaccine player, but they have obviously had to navigate that more challenging environment.
It feels like that goes back to the central kind of ethos of the trust, where it's investing in the next generation. So given the fact that you were a holder pre-pandemic, it's moving, you were thinking about the next generation and its potential beyond kind of that crazy period.
Exactly. And the benefit of the pandemic for Moderna is it's provided it with a very large cash pile for them to be able to go about spending and investing in these new areas over time. The negative of that experience for them has been trying to navigate from, from selling unbelievable quantities of vaccine to selling much lower amounts, and trying to work out where that sort of steady state level was going to be.
Okay. Now we're in the last few minutes here, so maybe we've got somebody here would like to hear a little bit more about what you've learned from a mistake. Lessons learned from Neuro and Carvana. So if you consider those to be mistakes, or what are the lessons learned from Neuro and Carvana?
I think the challenge with something like a Carvana has been so this is a secondhand car platform in the US, so for selling secondhand cars. And I think the challenge that they faced was ultimately the way the business was structured, that when the interest rate environment changed, it created a lot more pressure for them as a company. And we had a genuine question as to whether the company would be able to survive the environment that they were in, and we consequently sold. Now, the share price has done extremely well since we've sold. But I think for me, the reason that we sold at that point in time was the company was not in control of its own destiny at that point in time. The company was reliant on the market environment changing. And ultimately, our ability to have insight as to when and if that happens is relatively limited. And so from a sort of process and philosophy and process point of view, I think it would have been very difficult for us to continue to own that business at that point in time, when we had serious questions as to whether it was actually going to be able to survive. And that's why we decided to sell it. Unfortunately, since then, like I say, the share price has done really, really well. But I think that ultimately that has been particularly reflective of the fact that there have been easing concerns around interest rates and where things are, and that the pressure on the business and the amount of debt that they have and the model that they operate, people feel is less under threat than it would have been.
So you were slightly cautious in that regard, and given the fact that maybe the economic environment is softening perhaps a little bit more than we had anticipated. Is that fair to say?
I think that we tried to be very long term in the way we went about investing in Carvana, and we held on and we kept underwriting our investment case. We revisited the upside case that we felt we could make, etc. But it got to the point where we just didn't have enough conviction in that upside case to be able to continue to hold it, and consequently we sold.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, we are nearly out of time. So there's one last question. This is the final question. It's quite a technical one, but I think maybe we'll get on to the specifics of the trust. So could you have a word, could you comment on the NAV? So given 30% private valuation, is the current 13% discount to NAV fair?
Well, I don't believe it's fair, but ultimately, what we spend our time focusing on is trying to invest in the most exceptional businesses that we can. And I think that the NAV has been a reflection of concerns people have around the interest rate environment, combined with feelings around growth investments generally, and whether this is the right environment to investing in growth companies. I think we've done a lot of work trying to show people that ultimately the fundamentals of these companies are really quite strong, even if some of the share prices have not been as strong. And then I think finally there have been concerns as well around private companies and how we go about valuing them. And like you mentioned earlier, like we've released a document that does a sort of deep dive on our website into the private companies, some more granular detail about those companies. We've also released information on how we go about valuing those businesses as well, to try and help people understand the regularity with which we value those. So no, I don't think a 13% discount is fair.
It certainly seems like there is an abundance of opportunity, and in keeping with the title, 2024 is we're going to see a lot of it, despite whatever curveballs, elections or politics may throw. It feels like there is you're on to the next generation of growth companies. So that's all we've got time for. So I'm afraid. So thank you, Kirsty, for your time and insights, and thank you all for watching and for your questions. We have more sessions like this coming up, so do keep an eye out for those if you found today useful. Thank you all very much.